Well, welcome everybody, and it's wonderful to see so many people here, and I'm glad to be here in Yorkton. It has been such a long time since I've been here, and great opportunity for us to move what we're doing around the province and getting other communities. So it is great to see so many people out. Excited to hear from Brad a little bit later, but first we got some business to do, so I'm going to call on our chair, Errol Fisher of Northridge Developments, if he'd come on up and he can officially open the meeting. As he's doing that, I just want to also acknowledge a couple of things. First, we've got our board members. If you wouldn't mind just raising your hand, new and or about to be new board members, existing board members, if you can just raise your hand really quickly. Great, thank you. So these folks are, and some of them are currently, and some will be, as long as you accept this, will be our board of directors. I want to thank you for that. I also just want to acknowledge just the land that we're on. It's with our Treaty 4 territory, as well as the homeland of the Métis. Really appreciate all of you being here today. Errol, if I can pass this on to you. And
thanks, Colin. And for the record, we did plan to start the meeting at 11:15, or I will call it to order at 11:21. That's what my phone says it is. We did that on purpose so you could all get settled, so we're not starting late. That's why I wanted to bring that up. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do some introductions, and Colin, you sort of spoiled that for me, but that's okay. I'd like to introduce this last year's board, and actually I'm going to have you stand up as I introduce you. I'm standing up already. Errol Fisher, I'm the chairperson. Keith Bird, Dana Padel, Ryan Smotra, Dion Malikoff, Mark Novakoski, Ben Miller, and Brian Barber is not here today. And big thank you to all of you for serving on the board this year. Like to also welcome, there's lots of special, you're all special guests, but in attendance today we have Gord Dobrowolski, the chair of the WCB board. Thanks for coming, Gord. So a couple of things about the voting rules. So only B-rate code companies can vote or make a motion today, and only one representative per B-rate company can be the designated voter. So first off, I'd like to call for a motion for adoption of the agenda. Everybody going by the rules that I just said? Ryan? Seconder?
I'll second Keith.
Keith, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. Would anybody like to add anything to the agenda? Doesn't look like it, so we'll move on to item number 3, adoption of the minutes. I don't know how many people have reviewed the minutes. It's AGMs aren't the most intense meetings that are out there, so there's not a heck of a lot in the minutes. It's kind of a repeat of what we're going to do today. I did review the minutes, and I'm sure every board member reviewed the minutes. So we need a motion to accept adoption of the minutes from March 24th, 2022.
No.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Mark. Seconder? Ben, thank you. All in favor? Anybody opposed? No. And there was no business arising out of the minutes. That's item number 4. For the annual report, item number 5. So the presentation of the annual report, there won't be a formal presentation. on all the reports within the annual report, but I'll be saying some comments, and then Colin will come up for some comments. But so for my end of it, it was a busy year. A lot got done this year. One of the big things that we did was our strategic plan. We updated it this year. We had a pretty good strategic plan in place. We met in Moose Jaw. We had all but one board member, I think. We had a lot of the staff there. It was very successful. We came up with a strategic plan, which then, of course, is delivered to Colin and his team, and they have to put it in place. And I think we have a really good plan moving forward, and they're doing an excellent job of implementing it. Also took part in the employee conference and the service awards. And the service awards, a lot of the board members go to that too. And I'm thoroughly impressed by the teamwork that is involved with all of the employees with the SCSA. They all strive to better themselves. They all get further education. Some of them do it on their own. Some of them do secondary education. They're also allowed to do some through work too. But it seemed like, because in the service awards, the managers get up and they talk about the people who have been around for 5 years and they're getting service awards. And I don't think there was a single person that wasn't furthering their education, whether on their own time or through the association. So that's great to see, because the better our people are, the better our association is. WCB funding was a big item this year. We're still working through that with all the safety associations. I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It involves some board members. I'm working together with WCB and the rest of the associations and their board members and their CEOs. There was some face-to-face, and now there's a lot of Zoom meetings, and it's actually been passed mostly off to our CEO, Colin, to represent our association and our members, because he understands what we're looking for, and he's doing a really good job of that. This association is very stable financially, and I'll give you a real brief look at the financial, and the financial statements are in there, but you'll see that we're hoping, and whoever hopes to have a deficit, but we are. We self-generate a lot of funds, and we have a pretty good reserve fund set aside. And by using up some of that reserve fund, and we don't want to use it all because there's the reasons that we have it there, we can lower the amounts that every employer has to pay into WCB to fund this association. So we looked at a deficit. Now, we've been trying to have a deficit for probably the last 10 years, and the economics and everything going on in the construction industry, and then you throw COVID in there. Our plans don't always work to have a deficit. And a lot of times we've made money even though we thought we'd have a deficit, but nothing wrong with that. But we are trying to use up, and I wouldn't call it excess funds, but it's, in tough times, you give some back. On our board this year, we have several of us that are resigning from the board. We've been around, I think I've been here 10 plus years. Ryan is resigning as well. We have John and help me out. Mike too. So 4 of us are resigning, but we also, I think, brought on 4 new members, which is awesome. I think at one time I did step down from the board a few years ago, and it's like you leave an old girlfriend, and you know what, you never know if you're going to come back, and I guess I did. Colin came whining to me to get me back on the board. And now we've got Carolyn who's come back too. I don't know if it's for the same reason or not, but I was very pleased to be able to represent the residential construction industry on the board. I think we've come a long way. I know we've come a long way in the 10 or 12 years I've been here. We're not even close to being what we were before, and it's all been good. I was part of the group that hired Colin, and that was a real good turning point for this association, and then his team. And he's bringing his team along very well, and I've known a lot of these people for a lot of years. We've had a great relationship with WCB, and that continues to go on. And that goes back since I was on this board. And we hope to continue that, and I think we will. Colin and his team have raised the profile of the SCSA and safety in Saskatchewan hugely in the last 10 years plus. And now we work with governments, and Colin is a big part of this at all levels, and the governments come to us to help to participate with them to promote safety. So I think the SCSA is doing an excellent job, and I think we're getting better every day, continuous improvement. So that's my chair report, and now we'll have Colin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a huge amount to add. I mean, certainly there's a written report here for you, but I think just a couple of things I would highlight. First of all, just thank you to our board members that have either completed terms or it's time to step down. And this board renewal business, we all know it has to happen at some point, and here we are, and it's sad to see people go who've made commitments over the years to us, and not just dedication time, but just the mental effort, the care, and the promotion that they've done, both in their companies, in the industry, but to also other places. And we've got a number of our board members that have worked with us with others across the country, whether within their own companies or other companies, and given us opportunities to learn, but also share what we have learned. So I thank you, and I'm also excited about our new board members that are coming on, and it's always great to get fresh energy, fresh ideas, and thoughts, enthusiasm. We're really excited about having them as well. I mentioned the report look back over this last year. Both in our staff, but also in our industry, felt the same kinds of things where the word adaptability, well, first it was pivot, but I'll drop the word pivot and switch to a broader term called adaptability, and because it's something we've had to do over the last year, but it's also what we need to do in the future, and that's where we know our workforces need to be. Adaptability from perspective of being able to learn something, unlearn something, and relearn something, and then apply it almost on a dime. It used to be that you could plan for 5-10 years in the future, and that was maybe not necessarily 10 years, but you look out far ahead and try to predict what's going to happen. Well, that often happens in a much more stable environment. The last 3 years have not afforded us that, but what it has done is accelerated a lot of things that we thought one day may come, and all of a sudden we're doing. And the future will continue to be more of that with smart technology, with culture change, with a lot of those things are all feeding into the need for us to be adaptable. So it's for us to be adaptable for internally as an organization to be able to support our members who are facing really rapid change. As Errol spoke about our strategic planning work that our board got together in the fall, we also need to thank all of you that have participated in surveys and other kind of focus-related groups for us to feed into that. I think it was the largest stakeholder. This is the largest stakeholder engagement that we've ever had, and it really was helpful to inform for us the needs of all of our members, and included things like, we want to know how to use technology, but we have many more people that have English as a second language, and the dynamics that puts into play on the work site. Are there ways that we can adapt to help? I'm going to say kind of fill some gaps. We can't fill them all, but to be able to fill a few gaps and help build some bridges in there as well to facilitate the kinds of things that our members do need. The last thing I'll say is that we've done a lot of work in the area of technology. Many of you have begun using tools, whether it started out with mobile apps to the SCSA analytics platform, which a lot of our advisors are spending more and more time with our members. And it's great to have cool technology to do stuff. Everybody likes cool stuff. But what's critically important and what we've realized is that you can't get away from the people side of things. We're all in a people business, whether we could say we build things, but we're all in the people business. So the reality is that we need to be both a high-tech and a high-touch organization. And so that's a big part of what we're going to be focusing on. Again, looking in the future, I tend to be one foot in the present and the other one in the future, is the fact that our people and the investment that we're making in them is really about getting them ready to be able to engage people in ways that sometimes a bit challenging. It's hard to find sometimes that kind of skill. So we're working together to be more engaging. Having an opportunity to be here like this would be one example of being able to meet you. So that's really all I've got, Mr. Chair. I know everything's in there and it's your meeting, so I'll stop talking. But outside of that, thank you again for coming here today, and look forward to the rest of look forward to lunch and the rest of the day. So thank you again. Oh, sorry, one other thing before you start clapping, because I could see your thing. Good, get off the. On your tables, you'll see this. This is new for us. It's called a transparency report. I just shared it with our board earlier. This is on our website as well. You sometimes would see these for publicly traded companies or private sector companies that post that kind of thing on there. It just gives people a kind of a bird's eye view into some things and how we do business, whether it be procurement or how we hire or how our board is structured. All this information has always been available, but just to be able to put it in one spot to make it a little easier for people to find, because oftentimes we get questions on, hey, how does this work and how does that work? So hope you find that helpful. Again, it is available on our website under governance, and with that, I am done for sure.
Thanks, Colin. And to a point that Colin alluded to just on the tip of the iceberg there, the fact that we're in Yorkton today. I don't think we've ever had an AGM outside of Saskatoon or Regina. And this was a board thing that we want to get into more communities, whether it be AGMs, board meetings, whatever it is, just to get out into more of the communities across Saskatchewan. So now I would like to call for a motion to accept the annual report. Keith, thank you. Seconder? Ryan? All in favor? Anybody opposed? Thank you. Item number 6.0, the auditor's report and financial statements. We're calling for a motion to accept the auditor's report and the financial statements, which I believe are they're in the package, which has been reviewed obviously by the board and by the finance committee. So it's all good. Trust me. Or read it. So I need a motion, please. Seconder? So that was Dana. Sorry, Jenna. Normally Jen is looking the other way. I don't have to say who it was. Second. Mark. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Carried, thank you. So now we need a motion to appoint KPMG as our auditor for next year.
Make a motion, Matt.
Van, seconder.
I'll motion it.
Dana. All in favor? Anybody opposed? So just a little bit of information on that. When we do go through when they do the audit, part of the board meets with the auditor without any of the staff in the room, and we ask, okay, are they buying boats or anything, and is there any sign of that they're siphoning money out of the organization? And this year there really wasn't much. Way less than last year. No, it's we get a really good report from them. It's like they say that we give them some of the best information of a lot of the people that they audit. So kudos to Kelly and her team for presenting them with all the stuff they need. It goes very quickly, very smoothly, and there's nothing out of the ordinary. And it's been the same since I've been on this board. So good job. Item 8.0, this is the resolution regarding the acts of officers and directors. So I'll call for a motion after I read this out. And it's to accept all the acts and decisions of the officers and directors of the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association throughout 2022 be ratified and approved. So I need a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Mark.
Second,
And Keith, all in favor? Anybody opposed? Just to let you know, I don't think we did anything stupid or anything anybody's going to get sued for. Item 9.0, the appointment of the 2023 Board of Directors. First off, I'd like to introduce our incoming chairperson, Keith Bird. Keith, you stand up. You've been up before, but... And I'd like to introduce the Board of Directors for 2023. You've met some of them already. Brian Barber isn't here. Ben Miller, we've met. Sorry, you haven't. So Ben, yes you have. The new ones though, I'm gonna want you to stand up when I do say your name. So Ryan Juransky from Saskatoon, actually Martinsville. TJ King. Corey Johnson. And Carolyn Bagno, who's back on our board after a 5-year absence. And we have Mark who's staying on, and Dion who's staying on, and Dana staying on. And do we need a motion to accept the new board? It doesn't say that here, but I think we do, so.
We'll need the recommended slate of candidates to be appointed.
Yes. So I need a motion to accept the slated candidates to be next year's 2023 Board of Directors for the SCSA. Ryan, seconder.
I'll second. Mark.
Good job, Mark. All in favor? Carried. So, thank you very much. These always go very quick. It was a pleasure serving on this board for as many years as I did, and it's like you always get back more than you put in. The amount of people that I've been able to meet, the connections that I have, and that's at all levels, and even government officials, and the amount that I've learned about safety. And actually it's important too when you get on the board, because I'm representing the residential industry. And as Colin said, I don't know if it was in our board meeting this morning or now, like it seems odd that we would ask for more occupational and health safety officers out there, but we do. We want to make it an even playing field, and we also, more importantly than that, want to make it safe for everybody that's working out there. So, like I said, it seems that it's like, who asks for more police officers on the highway when you want to get somewhere quickly? Well, we're kind of asking for that. And I've been able to influence a few things to represent the residential construction industry. And I think we heard today from Jonathan that the residential construction industry is actually doing quite well, improving on their safety. There's been a bit of a focus on that because we were the worst. It's a really hard one to police when we're spread all over the place. You know, you go to a big commercial site, everybody's inside one fence. Well, when you're residential and you're building 80 homes and you're lucky if 2 of them are next door to each other, it's a bit of a challenge. So anyway, I will call for an adjournment at, my watch is wrong, but it's somewhere around 11:42. Lunch will be at noon. It might be ready a little sooner. If it is, we will let you know. So, mingle.
Mix and mingle.
Thank you, everybody.
So just as a bit of background for us as an association, I just want to mention a few things. Many of our members shared their concerns around mental health and seeing trends that are really disturbing for them. We've often thought, and typically started thinking of safety from a physical perspective, and eliminating visible hazards, things that we know that are quite obvious. We've got some housekeeping issues or a piece of equipment that could potentially hurt somebody. But we also need to involve what's going on the inside. And there's a whole range of reasons for that, and we'll get a chance to chat about that a bit more. But whether it be anything from substances to severe harm, personal harm to themselves, or just simply not being able to pay attention in the moment because there's something that's really grasping your attention in such a way that you're not able to focus on the work you've got in front of you. The nature of working in construction is that you can have a lot of psychological impacts, long hours, physical demands, often working away from home and in remote areas that can take us away from our kind of the grounding that we so much have when we are closer to home. And WorkSafe Saskatchewan, just the higher rates of suicide, more mental health concerns than the general population. I was on a radio show not that long ago, and had this conversation with somebody about often with men in particular, we're seeing that maybe 5 times the average rate of suicide. In construction, it's much higher. Some reports are showing 7 or even 8 times that of the normal population. And so this is pretty significant. And so we really wanted to bring a focus today, not just to get a meeting done and move on, but actually spend some time talking about this. And so we invited Brad Siroski. And so I'll introduce Brad really quickly. He is an award-winning mental health and substance use educator. He's very well versed in the field of mental health and addictions, and has come from his own personal battles and realized his most powerful tool to help others was his voice. So Brad was tested again when he received a cancer diagnosis back in 2015, faced this head on, and is currently living cancer-free. So excited to hear that. This experience gave Brad a really unique perspective on how people are treated when they're struggling through addictions in comparison to struggling with cancer, just another disease. Holding a mental health and addictions diploma through Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technology, Brad works as an outreach addictions counselor. He recently opened a private practice and works with communities to provide mental health and addiction support through his educational groups based around mental wellness and holistic healing. Through Brad's experience of coping with both mental health and issues and addictions, we'll learn how to recognize some of the signs of these problems, as well as how to support ourselves and others who may be struggling. So please help me welcome Brad Siroski.
Great. Check. We're good to go here with the mic, it looks like. So thank you guys. I want to start by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 4 territory. And I also want to thank the SCA group, Ed, Amber, I've met with already, and everybody else that I'm meeting today for having me here to talk to you guys today about what it's primarily like to be a man struggling with mental health and substance use in the workforce. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. That was a great bio, so I don't have too much to say here. As mentioned, I work as an outreach addictions counselor in the community in Saskatoon, and I work with the most vulnerable population in Saskatoon. So what I mean when I say the most vulnerable population, I mean that I work with people who can't make regular appointments, who struggle with homelessness, who may be fresh out of correctional centers. I work with people who maybe have concurrent disorders, which is strong mental health and addictions combined. And I meet them where they're at. And what I mean by that is that if they live on the street or they live in a shelter or they just out of the jails, I'll meet them wherever I need to meet them, whether it's a coffee shop, a back alley, and help them get the supports that they need. So it's sometimes a dangerous job, but it's a very rewarding job as well. I work with a bunch of amazing people. One of those people is my boss, who allows me to be here to do public speaking on days like today. So I appreciate that she's opened up that opportunity for me. And as mentioned, I'm also an award-winning program designer. I've designed a few programs One being a Mental Wellness 30 program for high schools. And what this program looks like is you can take this Mental Wellness 30 course and you can get a grade 12 credit for it. So if you're like me, who chose to not take computers or French in high school, which in hindsight was a really bad idea, you can take a mental health program and get a grade 12 credit for it. And you can take it between the grades of 10 and 12. And I'm really proud of that program, because I truthfully think if they would have had that program when I was a younger kid, that maybe I wouldn't have struggled as much as I did. The other program that I helped design was a program for the service industry of Canada, and we designed 9 modules that were provided to the service industry of Canada to help their employees who are struggling with mental health. And some of these modules included modules on anxiety, stress, depression, substance use, discrimination, abuse. And what happens with these modules is they're made available for any of the employees. So if you came to your boss and said, I'm struggling with stress and anxiety, he could say, not only talk to you about it, but he could provide you with these modules that could help you. And some people shared their stories, some videos, and there was some workbooks and stuff attached to it. And we ended up winning an award from the Service Industry of Canada for our participation in that. And I think that this would serve a lot of companies really well, because if you do come often to a boss, it's really hard to come forward with mental health issues, and this is a good way to keep to keep it confidential, to keep it anonymous, where you could learn things on your own. So I was proud to be a part of this program, and since I'm up here tooting my own horn right now, I just actually won the Queen Elizabeth Jubilee medal last week as well. So for my work in the mental health and addictions field. So all those things, thank you. So those are kind of my credentials, I guess, so to speak. And I'm going to for about the next 35 or 40 minutes, I'm going to talk to you guys about what it was like, as I mentioned, being a man, struggling with mental health, through the whole workforce. For as long back as I can remember, I've worked. I started working on my dad's farm when I was 6 years old. I was born and raised on a farm just outside of Davidson, Saskatchewan. And I remember I looked up to my dad, and by 6 years old, I was dragging hay bales across the yard. He had formulated little chop pails so I could help feed the animals, and I was working. And I wanted to be right beside my dad, but the problem was that he was a really shitty boss, because he was verbally and physically abusive, and he was often physically abusive because he was an alcoholic. So my first boss I ever had was not the most ideal boss. And what happened with me was he would tell me all the time, you're stupid, you're useless, you're worthless, you're never going to amount to nothing. And after a while, that started to cause some real serious problems with me. I started to develop a lot of anxiety. I think I was likely clinically depressed by the time I was 9 or 10 years old. And I didn't really want to be around him as much. And I didn't really want to be at home. And at 13 years of age, I was introduced to alcohol, and I went out and I got drunk for the first time. And when I had my first drink, the anxiety at home went away. And when I had the second drink, the stress went away. When I had the third drink, I realized that, I feel confident, I can talk to people. And by the time I had the fourth drink, I was in a lot of trouble. Alcohol became a staple in my life at a very young age. At the age of 15, I had a conversation with my father. He said to me, do you want to be on this farm? And I said, no. And he said, that's fine. You'll have to continue doing your regular chores, but you're not going to sit around like a lump all summer. You're going to get a job. So my next door neighbor was 16. He had a driver's license. He worked for a construction company. So I asked him, can you get me a job? He said, yeah. I started working for the construction company. And when I was working for this construction company, I loved the work right away. I was a hardworking kid. My dad, that was one thing my dad did, was he instilled a serious work ethic in me. And I was a hardworking kid, so right away I became a member of the team with the construction company. The guys didn't really see me as a 15-year-old. They see me as a coworker. So part of the problem that came with that is after work, there was beer, and there was marijuana, and there was all these things. And they didn't care that I was 15, because as long as I could hold my own on the job, have a beer. You worked hard today, you deserve it. And this did not help my substance problems that I had already developed. And by the time I was 17 years old, I almost didn't graduate high school. I was using alcohol, marijuana on a regular basis. Excuse me. And almost didn't graduate high school, but I managed to graduate, and I decided I wanted to go into the carpentry construction field. So I went to Moose Jaw to a program that at the time was called the Building Construction Program. I think it's now called carpentry, maybe, I'm not sure. I went through that program, and when I got into that program, I realized that I didn't know a lot about construction. I knew a lot about pushing a wheelbarrow, and I knew some stuff about hanging rebar and cleaning up job sites, but I didn't know a lot about construction. So the schoolwork and stuff became very stressful for me. I had a lot of anxiety around the schoolwork, and my coping mechanism for that anxiety, as we know already, was alcohol. So I started to drink, and I got kicked out of that program that year because I drank so much that I missed too much school and my marks dropped. I got kicked out of the house that I was living in that city for destroying it and having too many parties and not paying the rent because I spent all the money. I received 2 impaired driving charges that year. I went to my first rehab and I went to jail. All before I was 19 years of age. And I didn't think I had a problem, I just thought I had bad luck, and this was a sign of what would be to come for the next 17 to 20 years of my life. So when all these problems came up in Moose Jaw, I did something that I always did, I ran from those problems. I took off, I went back home to Davidson. I applied for a job at a company that would it becomes a staple in my story. They hired me more than one time, and I started working for this company in Davidson called Panther Industries. They bagged potash and stuff like that there. So I got a job, and I was a hard worker. I could hold my own. I think I was 6 foot tall, 180 pounds at 15 years of age. So I could hold my own at the physical labor aspect of it. And when I went back there though, there was a lot of booze. Every day after work, the guys would go out for drinks. And what I found is some of the guys would go out once or twice a week, but I would go out every night. And most of the guys would come home at a regular time, and I was always the last guy there. And eventually I'd burn a lot of bridges in my hometown and kind of not be the best employee and struggling with places to live because I wasn't paying rent. And I'd run from my problems again and head up to Saskatoon. And I'd mess around in the labor field for a while, deliver some drywall, stuff like that. And one of the jobs I was working at, one of my buddies said, "Hey, you're a pretty big guy. Why don't you come work with me at this nightclub? I got a doorman job. It pays $75. He goes, you can keep your day job. He goes, this pays $75 a night cash. Easy work." So I said, sure. The boss at this job realized that I had a lot of friends that came into the nightclub and said, you'd be better served working behind the bar. So he promoted me, made me a bartender. And for a little while, all my problems in life kind of went away. I was making really good money. It was nothing to take home $300-400 a night in tips. I was only working 4 hours a night. So if you do the math back then, that's pretty huge money. It's still pretty huge money right now. $100 an hour is nothing to shake a stick at. And I was getting paid to party, hang out with girls, listen to live music, all these things that I love to do. So for a while, all the stress and all the anxiety and all that stuff went away. And then I started hanging around the club and helping out a little bit more. I was bored. I was only working 12 hours a week. I'm like, I gotta do something. So I started hanging out. I started doing some renovations with the boss, built a deck with him. And he realized that I like to work. So he said, hey, I got this promotions management job that's coming up. It's about 20 extra hours a week. Do you want to take it? I said, sure. Need some extra work. I need something to do anyways. Gave me the promotions management job. He said, there's gonna be a guy that's gonna train you. He's gonna train you for about 2 months. And I said, great. So he gave me the job. It looked more like about 40 or 50 hours a week. Wasn't what he promised. The training kind of fell through, and it became super stressful right away. So I didn't really know what I was doing, and I had picked up a lot of bad habits as well. I introduced myself to some harder drugs when I got into the nightclub. I started taking drugs like acid and ecstasy and drugs like that. And I started to become stressed because it was this vicious circle. I would be stressed from work, so I'd use substances to take away that stress. But then I'd do a crappy job at work, which would make me even more stressed, so then I just use more substances, and it just became this vicious circle. And pretty soon I wasn't sleeping at night. My friend introduced me to pills to help me sleep. I was taking pills, and I was run down, and I was beat down, and I was just about at my wit's end, and my buddy said to me, I got something that can help you out. And he introduced me to cocaine. And that drug would almost kill me. So now I was this mess. I was doing all these different substances. I was doing cocaine. What a normal day would look like for me is I would get up, about 7 in the morning. If I'd slept the night before, I'd brush my teeth and throw up, not necessarily in that order. I would go to work around 10 o'clock. And I'm sure you guys have heard the saying, avoid the hangover, stay drunk, or hair of the dog, or any of that stuff. I would start drinking, because if I didn't, my hands shook, and I felt nauseous, and I felt weak. So I would start drinking, and as soon as I had that first drink, it would make me feel better. So I'd keep drinking, and have 1 or 2 drinks an hour till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And for those of you who are aware of this, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. So it slows you down. That's why you get the slurred words. That's why you kind of get that sloppy, staggery thing, because it's depressing your central nervous system. And cocaine is a central nervous system stimulant. So by 5 o'clock, I'd be feeling that sloppy, drunk feeling, and I would call my drug dealer, and he would come and he would deliver cocaine to me, and I would level myself off. And this is how it would look for the next 12 hours of my life. Between 5 p.m. and 5 a.m., I would just drink, take cocaine. Drink, take cocaine. Drink, take cocaine. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'd go home and I'd either drink and take pills till I passed out, or I'd keep doing cocaine and stay up the rest of the day and start the shift over again. And this is how my life looked for about the next 7 years, until I found myself face down on my apartment floor in a pile of my own puke and urine, and it felt like somebody was sitting on my chest. So I cleaned myself up and got myself to the hospital, and I found out at the age of 31 that I was having a cocaine, alcohol, and stress-induced heart attack. 31 years of age. My doctor told me that day, he said, if you don't quit right now, you will not see the next 2 weeks. He said, you need to quit right now. And it scared the shit out of me, so I did. I stopped. I said, enough of this. I quit cold turkey right then. And I started to really work on myself physically. First off, I quit doing drugs, which was a serious plus to my physical aspect. I started sleeping better. I started eating better. I started exercising. But I took really good care of myself physically, but I didn't take care of myself in any of the other areas of my life. I was still in the same job position. I was super stressed, and I had never, ever dealt with stress without alcohol or without drugs. I had never ever had any type of coping mechanisms except for alcohol and drugs to deal with my stress. So I didn't change that. I was still working in the nightclub. I was hanging around drug users, drug dealers. I didn't deal with any of the trauma from my younger years, from my childhood, from my father, none of that stuff. I didn't change anything except for the physical aspect of my life, so I was still dealing with all of that stuff, with all those mental health issues. So it was no surprise when my doctor gave me a clean bill of health 2 years later that I started using cocaine again. Sorry. So I started using again, and for any of you guys who know anybody that have struggled with substances or any kind of addiction, often when they start up again, they start up right where they finished off. And they're using just as much, if not more. And that was the case with me. I didn't bring the alcohol back in because everybody said, the alcohol is your problem. Stay away from that. So I thought, I'm just going to use a little bit of cocaine. And for any of you guys who know anything about cocaine, there's not a lot of people that use just a little bit of it. Within a few months, I had lost a lot of weight. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping again. Cocaine's like steroids for your anxiety. So the anxiety and the mental health issues were through the roof again. I was starting to have psychosis from not eating and sleeping, and I was a mess. And somewhere in the middle of this mess, I managed to meet a woman. We've seen each other for about 6 months, and I tried to hold myself together, but didn't really work. And at the 6-month mark, she said, I got to talk to you. And to be honest, I thought she was calling me to break up with me. And she said, I'm pregnant. And I said, oh, no, you're not. And she said, no, I am. And I said, no, you're not. And she said, yeah, I am. And I said, well, you can't be pregnant. I'm a mess. I'm a kid. I'm a kid myself. I can't raise a kid. And then I started thinking to myself, I always wanted to be a good dad. I always wanted to be a better father than I had. Maybe I can do this. I've cleaned myself up once before. Maybe I can do it again. So I tried to quit. And I would go for about 2 weeks. And then the stress of work would get to me. And I'd use cocaine again. Or the stress of the relationship, or the stress that my daughter's mother was struggling with the pregnancy, or family stuff, or any of that stuff, and I would use again. And then I would feel all these things that I recognized from my childhood. I'd feel shame and guilt, problems of self-worth. And the only thing in my mind that would make those things go away was alcohol and drugs. So I'd use again. And it became this vicious circle where I was trying to get better, failing, using, feeling shame, and it just kept going and going for 9 months until eventually on February 2nd, 2009, my beautiful daughter, Kiara Siroski, was born. And it was the proudest moment of my life. I held her in my arms and I looked down and I sang to her and I cried and I made this promise to her. I said, I'm going to be a better dad than I ever had. I'm going to get myself better. And it was also the hardest day of my life because 8 hours later I was, excuse me, using drugs in the hospital parking lot with my drug dealer. So this is when things got really dark in my life. I figured if I can't do this for myself and I can't do this for this little girl, then I can't do this at all. So I added alcohol back into the mix. I had quit my job, so I had no money, and I started to steal from my partner. I started to take her money from our joint bank account. I had a serious substance use problem and I had no money coming in, so I started taking money that was meant for our daughter's diapers, that was meant to put a roof over her head, that was meant to pay for her formula, and I spent it all. And eventually my daughter's mom couldn't have me around anymore and she said, you gotta go. So I ran from my problems again, this time to Cold Lake, Alberta. My buddy had a small business out there, renovations, home renovations. He said, I know you've got some experience with some carpentry. He goes, I'll teach you the rest, come on out. But he had some mental health and addictions problems, and I had some mental health and addictions problems, and within a year we ran his company right into the ground. So I ran from Cold Lake back home to Davidson. And I went back to that same company I worked for before I went back to this place called Panther, and they said they'd heard, in small towns it gets around, they'd heard that I was a risky investment. So but they took me back, and over the next 16 months that I worked with them, I would be in a detox program 11 times. I'd be in 2 28-day residential recovery programs. I'd be in one 3-month-long recovery program. I'd be in one day program that lasted about a month as well. So if you do the math, I wasn't really at work all that much. I was struggling so hard with the substance use, but my boss, he kept going to bat for me. He kept listening to me. He kept trusting me. But I was doing all these things, and I knew I was close to burning this bridge, and that wasn't enough to make me quit. And my family said, we don't want you around anymore. My sister said, we're scared to have you around our kids. My mom and dad said, you steal everything that's not bolted down. Your dad's wallet's $100 lighter every time you come out. We can't have you around, and that wasn't enough to make me quit. Started having serious physical health problems. Alcohol and benzodiazepines are the only drugs that can kill you when you're detoxing from them. And I was drinking a lot of alcohol, upwards of 80 ounces a day. So when I'd try and quit, I'd have seizures, have grand mal seizures. And when I was having one of these seizures, I broke all the teeth off in the back of my mouth. I bit halfway through my tongue. I had to get 27 stitches. And this wasn't enough to make me quit. And then finally, one day, my daughter's mom she phoned me and I answered the phone. And I said, what do you want? And she says, where are you? And I said, what do you care? She said, you're supposed to be here. I said, I'm not supposed to be there till Wednesday. She said, Brad, it's Wednesday. I thought it was Sunday. She said, listen, the last handful of times you've come here, you had booze on your breath. I'm afraid to put our daughter in the car with you, and she should have been. She said, you've let me down numerous times. When I get back, I'm filing for sole custody of our daughter. And this was like, it was like somebody took my heart and ripped it out of my chest and threw it on the floor and stomped on it. And I said, you can't do that. And she said, I'm going to do it. And this was like the proverbial straw for me that broke the camel's back, I guess. I knew that I had to get better. And I remembered my boss, who had this kind of open door policy for me. I remembered him mentioning that there was this guy at the program that had been through this treatment program called Teen Challenge, and that it was this year-long program. And I knew I needed something. I knew I needed a change. So I phoned my boss and I said, hey Clay, can you send John over with that information for the Teen Challenge program? And he said, I'm proud of you. And it really caught me off guard because I hadn't done a lot to make anybody proud. He said, I'm proud of you for making this step. He said, I'll send John over. And I thought John would come in the next 4 or 5 days, and within 10 minutes, John was at my door, and he put those papers on my desk, and he made me sign them because I was intoxicated, and he said, you're signing them now, and we're sending them away. So I signed them, and he sent them off, and I didn't get better right then, but I went to Teen Challenge August 21st, 2012, and I haven't touched a drop of alcohol or a drug ever since. I've been sober ever since that day. And usually this is the part of my story where I talk about what the Teen Challenge program was like, where I talk about what it was like going back to my home community where everybody still drank. The only thing that changed really in that community was kind of me, in my opinion anyways. I usually talk about my battle with cancer. I usually talk about going through SIT and all this, and the stuff that I told you at the beginning, what's happening right now. But because this is for the SAS Construction Safety Association, I thought I would tie in some of the struggles, the successes, and the supports that I had through all my years with mental health and addictions. I'm going to start with the struggles because I like to get the shitty stuff out of the way. So my struggles, my first real problematic boss was my father, but I'm paying a therapist a lot of money to deal with that one. So we'll leave that out of this presentation. But the first time I really noticed that I had mental health issues was when I was working in the nightclub. And I was dealing with all that stress and that anxiety that I alluded to earlier. And I went to my boss and I remember I said to him, I said, you were supposed to have this guy that was supposed to help me for 2 months. He's not here anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm super stressed out. I need some support. I need some help. And he said, there's 20 people outside that door who would take this job in a second. If you can't do it, get out. So not only did I have the stress around not being able to necessarily do that job properly, but now I had the stress about possibly not having that job. The second problem I had, same group of people, same company, is we ran a lot of events at that place. And when we were getting supplies, me and a friend were getting supplies for one of the events, we found a guy face down in a snowbank. So we turned him over, we gave him CPR, the ambulance got there, and we found out that he had a cardiac arrest and he was likely, excuse me, he was likely gone before we got to him. It was a really traumatic event for me and my friend, and I remember saying on the way back, I can't work tonight. And when we got through the door, my boss instantly was like, where were you guys? And we told him, and instead of saying like, whoa, do you need to debrief or do you need to talk about this? I said, I think I need to go home. And he said, if you guys leave that door, don't come back. So this was the second time that I had approached mental health with this. Well, actually, this is probably about the 22nd time, but this is like one of the bigger events. And then the last time is when I came to him about my substance use. And I told him, I said, I didn't even ask him to give me a time off or anything. I just asked to switch positions. I wanted to go from the night management to the day management because I thought I got a family coming. And maybe if I stay out of the nightclubs at night, it's going to prevent me from doing some of that drinking and some of those drugs that I'm constantly around at nighttime. So I asked him about that, and he basically told me, he said, if you can't handle, he said, Brad, substances are part of the nightclub environment. If you can't handle that, I think you should leave. And finally I did. So those were the kind of the first 3 times that I approached mental health or addictions to my bosses. And so it was no surprise when I was struggling with all that substance use when I went back to Panther that I didn't want to talk to my boss about it. When a door's continually slammed in your face, you're not going to keep going to that room. You're just going to stop going. If you try and bring stuff up to people and they continually tell you there's something wrong with you, you're not going to keep bringing that stuff up. And that's exactly what I'd experienced, but I knew that if I didn't talk to my boss about this, I wouldn't have this job. So I went to him a few times. The first time I went to him, he said, I'm happy that you're here. Sit down, talk to me about anything. Welcome to my office, things like this. Come in. I told him, I said, I'm struggling with general anxiety disorder, cocaine use, and alcoholism. And he said, I don't know what a lot of those things are or how they affect you. He said, but I'm here to help you if you need. And he did. He put me through all those detox and recovery programs, and he listened to me, and his door was always open. So when it came time to make that phone call that I made around the Teen Challenge program, I wasn't afraid to make it because he'd never closed the door in my face. So I phoned him, and he said to me, yeah, he said, I'm proud of you. He sent John over. John came over, we filled that stuff out, and then I went and had a conversation with him. And he said to me, he said, Brad, you're making the right choice. I'm so proud of you. He said, not only will we pay for this program for you, there'll be a job here when you get out. He said, but but you have to complete the program. He said, if you don't complete the program, if you quit the program, you've quit this job. So he forced me to have accountability. He gave me a little bit of that tough love piece. He made me really take my own responsibility for my own actions, but in a loving way. So that was kind of the, to be honest, I probably would still be working with that company if I hadn't got diagnosed with cancer. But when I got diagnosed with cancer, I had kidney cancer. I had to have the top half of my left kidney removed, and they told me I wouldn't be able to do any type of labor work for approximately 8 months to a year. So I went and approached my bosses at that same company. They said, we got an office job for you if you want. I said, I can't work in an office. I got ADHD. I'll never make it. This is not a good atmosphere for me. They agreed. And at this point, I did something that a lot of people thought didn't make a lot of sense. There was a building sitting empty in town that used to be a restaurant and lounge. And because I was familiar with that field, I opened up my own business. And what I learned when I had my own business was that I learned from my first boss what not to do. And I learned from my second boss what to do. And I also realized that when you own the business, or you're a supervisor, or you're a foreman, that you have to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't be there for your employees. So I had to figure out how to take care of myself as well. So I started thinking about that and working on that. And as so often happens when you run your own business, and I talked to some people out there before about this, when you have your own business, if you have 4 or 5 employees, there's a solid likelihood that you have 1, maybe even 2 with mental health or substance use problems, whether you know about it or not. So if you have 400 or 500, do the math, right? I had a handful of employees, so it didn't take long before one of them came to me and was struggling with substance use. And so I took what I learned, what I learned not to do and what I learned to do, and I listened to him, and I heard him out, and I had an open door, and I drove him to detox, and I drove him to rehab, and I had to practice that tough love piece with him too, because he was starting to make the work environment dangerous. So I had to let him go, but I told him, you need to go to that same program I went through, and you need to get yourself better. And he finally agreed. And he decided in that program he didn't want to come back and work for my company, which didn't matter because we dissolved the company while he was in there anyways. But he decided he didn't want to come back to work for that company, but he did decide that he wanted to go on and help people. And I'm happy to report that employee that I helped works right across the hallway from me in my addictions counseling profession right now. So when we learn these things, when we have open door policies and open hearts, and we listen and we invite our employees in to talk to us, that's what happens. None of us, I didn't want to be an addict. He didn't want to be an addict. I didn't sign my grade 12 yearbook. Geez, I sure hope I'm an addict. That's not what anybody wants, but due to traumas and lots of other mental health issues, it's often what happens. So as bosses, as people, as human beings, we need to care, we need to have hearts, we need to open our ears and open our doors. And the last thing that I'm going to share with you guys today is about my current job. And I work, as mentioned before, I work with people who struggle with substance use and also mental health. And the sad reality of working with people who struggle really, really hard with substance use and mental health is that they often end up losing their battle to addictions or to the mental health, whether it be through suicide, through overdoses, through physical health related problems due to those things. And since I've started working in this field, I've lost 10 clients. I've been working in this field for 4 years. So 10 clients, that's a lot of people to lose in a short period of time. And about 18 months ago, I lost 2 clients within 2 weeks of each other. And those clients, I was really, really close, super close, closer than a counselor actually probably should be with the one client. And I had known the other client for quite a while too. But in the middle of that, I also lost a friend to pancreatic cancer, and I lost a friend to an overdose. So in a 2-week period, I lost 4 people that I was very close with in my life. I was trying to blend a family at that point, so I had all these problems at home. And I remember I woke up, and I remember it was a Wednesday morning, and I said, I shouldn't go to work today. And I'm like, come on, tough through it, because that's what we tell ourselves, right? Tough through it. That's what we tell ourselves as men, as women, as everyone, especially as men, because tough through it, right? So I went there, and every Wednesday we did a check-in. And we've since stopped doing it, and I just actually had a conversation with my boss yesterday about bringing back in because it's so important. And my boss, when it came to me, my boss said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "You know, if I had a broken leg or my stomach hurt, I wouldn't be here today. But I got a broken heart and my soul hurts, and I'm here," and I started to cry. Right in front of all these people. And still saying that in front of all these people as a man is hard for me to do. It's hard for me to admit that I cried in front of my peers. And this is the problem, men. This is why women do it so much better than us. Because they're vulnerable. They'll talk to people. They'll talk to their coworkers. They'll talk to friends. And we as men were taught, don't talk. Rub some dirt in it. I'll give you something to cry about. All these things. You don't share your emotions. You certainly don't cry in front of a group of men. You would very seldom ever see that on a construction site. I promise you that. And this is the reason that headlines read "Women talk and men die." And this is the reason to, like we alluded to before, that 3 out of 4 adults that take their own lives are male. Because we don't talk about it, men. And we need to start doing better. And now I'm off topic here. back to the piece about where I was talking to my boss. And my boss said to me, she said, "You know, Brad, can you hold on? We'll talk about this after." And actually she goes, "No, you know what? We're going to put this meeting on hold." She said, "Let's go talk about this right now." And she took me to her office and she said, "What's going on?" And I told her, and she knew about the 2 clients. We'd debriefed. We talked about it. And she said, "You know, just like you honor your physical health, you have to honor your mental and emotional health. If you need time off, you need to take it." She said, "You have 6 weeks worth of holidays." I think it was longer than that. I think I actually had 8 weeks at that point. And she said, "Go take a month if you need." She said, you're not healthy right now." And when she said that, she said, like, your mind's not in the game. You're not doing anybody any favors being here. And I started thinking, that week at work, I do a lot of driving with my clients. I'd ran 3 red lights because my head wasn't in the game. And I had a client with me when I ran one of them. I could have killed myself. I could have killed other people. My mind's not in the game. So transfer that into construction. You're running heavy equipment. You're operating machinery. You're running saws. You're doing whatever. If you're mentally and emotionally not involved, not in the right headspace, you can seriously harm yourself or possibly a lot of other people. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to all that stuff. So my boss sent me home, and I started thinking, what can I do here? What can I do to make myself better? And on the way home, I was just going to go to bed. And I started thinking, you know, if you had a physical injury, you would start to physio that injury, right? So your mental health and your emotions, they have to be the same way. How am I going to work through this? How am I going to build the strength around my mental health and emotions? And I started thinking, what would I do with my clients? Because the thing about people is that we're often really good at giving advice to other people, but we're not really all that good at taking some of our own advice. And that was me. I sat every day across from people who were struggling with the same thing that I was struggling with and told them how to basically help themselves, and I couldn't figure it out myself, so I started backing up and I started going, okay, what do I got to do here? And I realized the first thing I needed to do was recognize that trauma. So I had lost 4 people. Grief and loss is a serious trauma, and I had to recognize that and I had to honor it. And I had to figure out how to work through it. And I urge you guys, please, if you're struggling with traumas, be very careful and be selective about how you deal with it. Because if you rip the Band-Aid off a trauma, often it can be a pretty deep wound and you might bleed to death. So if you're going to deal with the trauma, make sure you have the proper supports around you. Make sure you're connecting with the right people. Make sure that your therapy is very trauma-informed. So I realized that I had to deal with the trauma. And then I realized also I had to find a healthy way to deal with my mental health issues that I was having right then. When I was a kid, I didn't deal with things healthily. I used alcohol, I used drugs, I numbed everything with substances. So I had to figure out healthy ways to do that. So I started brainstorming. I thought, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to start talking to people. I'm going to do all these things. And I came up with healthy ways to make myself mentally better. Then I had to tell myself, just like in the part of the story when I went to my boss, I had to tell myself, you need to take a break. And you need to give yourself permission to rest. Because we need to rest. We can't, in this world, we're wired to go 90 miles an hour. Everybody do this, do that, always on, always turned on, never turned off. And it's causing a lot of problems. So I had to give myself permission to take that rest and get myself better. And these last three things I'm going to talk about, they're the most important ones. I had to look at self-care. And I'm not talking about a glass of wine, a Brené Brown book, and a bubble bath. I'm talking about the holistic approach to this. I'm talking about being better. There's nothing wrong with that other stuff, by the way. I'm talking about physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional health. Physically, what was I going to do? I mentioned this earlier. Started going to the gym. I started eating better. I cut back on caffeine and sugar because it didn't help me. I started to really try and rest better. I don't sleep well. I never have. It's lots of people who struggle with trauma don't sleep well. So I tried to sleep the best of my abilities. Spiritually, a lot of people get hung up on the spiritual piece. They think, oh, here he goes with spirituality. Got to go to church, all about God. Spirituality is anything that makes your soul happy. So for me, that does include prayer. It includes also music and nature and writing stuff down, not keeping things inside. It includes spending time with my family and my kids. That keeps me spiritually connected. So I started doing that stuff. Mentally, I had to deal with things mentally. What am I going to do? I know that negative thoughts equal negative actions. And I know that if I don't start listening to other people who are providing me with healthy ideas, that I'm never going to get better. So I started doing that. And then emotionally, I thought, what do I have to do here? What's going to make me better emotionally? And I thought, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm angry and I'm sad. But there's no wrong emotions, you guys. Just like you have to honor joy and happiness, you have to honor anger and sadness, and you have to work through them. You just have to do it in a healthy way. So I thought, how am I going to work through this anger? And how am I going to work through this sadness? And I thought, this brings me to the last 2 points here, is that I thought, I got to have my supports. Who are my supports? Who are my people? And I thought, okay, my wife. She was my wife to be at that point in time. My kids. My boss, who I'd already talked to, who had an open door policy. My best friend, who's a man, and we talk, and we share things, and sometimes we cry, I know. I had to talk to him, and I had to go see a counselor. And here's the thing, men, and to all the men in this room, and to all the men that are listening, and I hope somebody puts this in a newspaper somewhere, if you're afraid to go if you're afraid to put your heart on your sleeve and share your emotions, go see a counselor, because you know what? We're sworn to confidentiality. We can't tell your neighbor Bob that you came and told us how crazy you are. We can't tell anybody. So if you don't want anybody to know and you're still carrying around that idea that men can't share, see a counselor. I've been seeing a counselor for a long time. I started seeing this counselor when I was going through this trauma, and she helped me. And the final thing is that really helped me was putting a voice to it. Putting a voice to my pain. And you don't have to stand up in front of a big group of people like I do on a regular basis, even though it has helped me a lot, and put a voice to your pain this way. You can just talk to that one person, that one counselor, that one boss, that one good friend, that your wife, your children. You can talk to those people. And that's what my boss gave me. She gave me that time to go home and to figure all that out. And she gave me this opportunity to feel like the door was open, and that I could trust her, and that I could talk to her. Because often, people who are struggling just need to be heard. And she gave me that. And so for all you bosses, open your doors, open your hearts, listen. For all you employees, be vulnerable. It's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to get up in front of people and share your raw emotions, but go to the people that you need to talk to. Take some of the advice that I shared today. Build off your own strengths. Because if you're struggling, if you use those supports, you'll always be successful. And I'm living proof that we do recover. Thank you, guys.